Hey guys, welcome to Survival Vietnamese, where we talk about Vietnamese language, Vietnamese culture, and a little bit of everything Vietnamese. So we have a special guest today. Today we have Elaine. So here on this, we just kind of wing it.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I totally get that. Yeah, we can just talk about how we got to this point, which
Yeah.
is so funny.
Okay, yeah. Did you request about tours or like whether I did tours? I can't remember now.
I requested about tours, like generally, did you know of
Yeah.
a tour
Mhm.
that did a lot of like history, architecture, exploration? Because I would like look up tours
Mhm.
and I got a lot of food tours and like just general things, which is great, but I just wanted to see if you had any knowledge of like more like detailed history kind of people who would do tours.
Yeah, and it just happened to be when me and a buddy of mine have been working hard to actually do tours here in Saigon and then in the rest of Vietnam as well. And the big inspiration for all of that was a study abroad program that I did in Hanoi
Mhm.
in the past. And it was so profound. We were traveling around with a professor, going across the country with a Vietnam scholar, whole
Yeah.
different level in terms
Yeah.
of like deep understanding of Vietnam. And that's no diss to any of the food tours. They're amazing.
Yeah.
But like I felt like that was kind of missing. And
Mhm.
we've been working hard to kind of build something like that just because I do have a background in history. I'm a big old nerd. I love every single nuance in the culture here. And I love this place. And we've been hard at work doing that. And then it just happened to be when you asked about it. And I was like, join ours as the first group. Yeah, so we just did our first one. So if you're interested, send me a message.
It's 10
But-
out of 10 experience. Truly
Yes.
great vibes.
Yes. You have parents who are still like active in their understanding of Vietnam and like very knowledgeable. And I feel like, that doesn't always just transfer automatically to the kids. The kids might even like kind of feel that's boring. But for you, you kind of carry that on from your parents, like your interest in it and like your deep rootedness in the culture continued on. Do you attribute that to your parents? Like, did they really kind of push that on you, or like that was just kind of a personal journey that you had?
It definitely is a personal journey because I'm also an only child. So everything ends with me,
Mhm.
right? I don't have siblings that I can kind of like split responsibilities with in terms of like caring for parents or like listening to parents and being like, oh, it's your turn to like talk to
Mm.
them about this. It's like it's always been me. So being an only child, being an only daughter
Mhm.
means that there was a lot of times where I just had to learn how to listen, and through listening, I learned a lot of really interesting stories because I'm also just like a nerd. There's a lot of different types of nerds, but for me, I really like deep history, a lot of nonfiction, a lot of memoir.
Mhm.
So when I finally got a moment to like really take a pause and listen to my parents explain why certain things need to be the way they are and how did they learn that, I was like, wait a minute, there's like something really interesting about how you've communicated a cultural tradition to me that
Mhm.
I'm just kind of like, I really like that and I want to keep that for
Mhm.
myself.
Mhm. Do you remember like any early things that your parents told you, like when you were really young?
Um, it's mostly with superstition, right?
Uh-huh.
So like feng shui.
Yeah.
For a long time, I'm just kind of like, oh, why does it have to be like this? Like,
Yeah.
can we just leave it? But at some point, was, my mom and my dad were like, no, it's really important for you to do this. Like, if you can take an hour or two of your day to just rearrange your room appropriately,
Uh-huh.
it's going to feel better. And then I
Uh-huh.
was just like, but why? But why? Because you're like a
Yeah.
bratty teenager.
Sounds like superstition, or it's
Yeah,
like,
it's a hocus pocus. Like,
uh-huh.
what's the logic behind this? But then they stopped to pause to talk about it, kind of like, you might not believe in the whole ghost will drag you out of your bed if your feet are like
Sticking out
facing
or facing the
the
door.
door.
Yeah.
Or like a spirit's coming through the mirror or something. So that's why you
Yeah.
have to cover the mirror if you have no choice but to sleep in front of the mirror.
Yeah.
But I value this because overall it makes me feel at ease in this house.
Okay, so you were not a believer in that, and
I
then you
wasn't.
ended up being like, "Oh my gosh, this
Yeah.
actually is a thing."
Yeah. And
Okay.
then it took my parents to be like, this is why, these are the superstition, like this is the explanation why. And they were very clear. So like, even though you might not like believe, for just the rest of the house, is it okay if we take one day or like a couple of hours out of your day to just do this? Because I promise you I will be a lot happier and I will stop nagging you. And I was like, you're gonna stop nagging me? I love you, thank you. So, you know, it's like that. It's like when I kind of got over the bragginess, or when I learned to like at the very least like make an agreement with my parents, like if you do this, you stop nagging me about this, and then like, okay, this feels like a fair exchange. And then all of a sudden, it took a couple of years, but when we like rearranged my room, I actually did feel a lot better.
Whoa, okay. Could you give us some examples of like what kind of arrangement is like ideal in feng shui?
Okay, so there's hướng, direction, right? The direction with which your door is facing. So that's like your front door. In the house I had been living in a very, very long time, it faced north, which was okay. It wasn't the best direction, but we were not the owners of the house. We were renting the house. And you know, it was just like I felt in that house a little bit like ugh. It's like I'm doing just fine, but it's very like I don't know. There was like this feeling of
like a blockage.
A blockage. It's like I cannot achieve complete happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm so fortunate. My family and I were able to go house hunting and purchase a home together in California. Who can do that? Who knows? But we were able to. And then I had to đứng tên, right? I had the best credit score. So they were kind of like, you. It has to be you. So they really put in an effort to find a house that was good for my
your age. What factors into that?
My age, my zodiac years, and then the elements, because it's kind of like
your zodiac element.
Yeah.
Right? Because this was something I learned recently too, is like you're not just like buffalo or dragon, it's like
metal, water, fire.
4 elements?
5 metal,
elements.
Wood, water, fire, earth.
Right.
And air. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So like that will correspond to certain directions and certain kind of arrangements.
Right? Yeah, so your front door, the way that like you open your door coming in and out, it would be dependent on the homeowner, the person who is like paying the mortgage, or like the biggest responsible party.
Right, yeah, who's ever đứng tên is like, you gotta check their zodiac.
Yeah, so that was me.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, công chúa, that's like Down Tai. So they had to find an east or west facing one. And then even then there's kind of like, okay, but then you cannot enter through this door. You have to go around because this door is facing west.
Oh, interesting.
So I can't go through my front door. I have to go through my back door.
And that's what you've been doing?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I have to like unlock my back.
Yeah.
It's a whole thing. But
that's
like
so interesting.
That's what is appropriate.
Yeah.
And the way that my quality of life, and not just like the fact that I was lucked out to find and afford a house with my family.
Yeah.
But my genuine feeling of happiness.
Yeah.
Going home every day. I like the blockage, this like feeling of sluggishness.
Yeah.
Absolutely dissipated.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's part of something that I've been exploring too. And that goes into this entire shift towards like more Eastern thought, Eastern philosophy, which you know, I want to talk to you about that as well. Definitely. Like the broader you know, systems of thought and stuff like that like I'm kind of like more curious about now. But specifically to that, like just feng shui, but also like even the business stuff, you know, because I'm like starting a business for the first time. I have been more open to those kind of ideas than ever before. And my team, when we were looking at renting this studio, told me that west facing was good for me because of my age and I'm a buffalo, and like I can't remember which type of buffalo I am, like 85, whatever element that is, but it's west facing, and they're like, this is it. You know, and I was like, I stopped my search. I was like, all right, let's go. Let's like go with this. Because like, I don't want to go through the trouble of like finding a place and it's like, wait, but this is east facing, you know, like it's already working out. And also like people started gifting me like altars, the money god altars. And we went like
you have your tree,
full
right?
on. Okay, we don't have the tree. We have the money god altar. We have the 2 statues. We have the cat. And we have, I'm a Theravada Buddhist, So we have this monk called Sivali in Theravada tradition, but it's really interesting because in a lot of Vietnamese places, they have him too.
Yeah.
Because Vietnamese people try to like, they're taking no chances in whatever
max it
works.
out.
Yeah. So
They max
Sivali
out.
is a monk who, like, according to the suttas, you know, like the Buddha took along, and he was a monk that anywhere that he was, they had such abundance.
Yeah.
Like when he was with them, like people would come and donate everything they needed and like have all the food, and like everyone was taken care of, and like the Buddha attributed it to him. Like he was like the monk you want around to like have all the needs taken care of, you know?
Yeah.
So I have his portrait as well. And it's been great. You know, I mean, I wouldn't say like I'm balling right now, but like, you know, we started getting a lot of leads and like all this kind of stuff. And like, I'm like, you know what?
I mean, that's how we ended up, like, great timing, me with my like
you know?
inquiry. It's like, hey, do you know if, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, actually, we've been literally waiting for a moment for this.
Yeah. And for me, like, you know what? Even if there's a slight bit of doubt, like whatever it is, it don't matter. I'm all for it. You know, like let's just do it. Just have faith, just set it up. Why not? Also, like, I know you're a Buddhist, right? And my family's Catholic. Just a few years ago, I started getting really interested in Buddhism, just kind of organically. I started to practice meditation, and then from there, I actually did great courses. I know we talk about great courses a lot too, because we're big nerds. But I took a great course on meditation, and then in that course, I learned about Thich and I'd never heard of him before, you know, and I was like, oh, this sounds like a Vietnamese name. And then I like Googled him and I was like, dude, this dude is like, he's got a lot of books, like very, very prolific. I was like, how did I never hear about him? And the first book that I read from him was called Teachings of the Buddha.
Yeah.
And now that I know him a lot more in his writing, he's really good at, like, I don't know how to explain this, but he's really good at not making things too Buddhist, I guess. It sounds kind of weird, but like it's very digestible for like non-Buddhists as well. And this particular book, I think, is one of his most Buddhist books, you know? And then me coming into it, I wasn't like Buddhist yet, you know? I'm just trying to meditate. And like, I just see this Vietnamese name and I'm like, oh, this... I was still in the thinking that, like, you know, Vietnamese people aren't that much in the mainstream yet. And here's this Buddhist writer who's like, seems to be really famous. And I was like, I gotta read his book, you know, which is silly. Like anyone who knows Thich Nhat Hanh is like, bro, he's been around, you know, but that was so new to me.
Yeah.
So then it just happened to be the first book that I read from him. And then like it went through just like the Buddhist teachings and like, you know, all the main ideas and like the major sutras in Buddhism and like all that. And then that was like my crash course.
Yeah.
And whether it was time in my life or whatever it was, like I was just right before that. I was ready, you know, like just for the Buddha's teaching at that time, it just completely resonated with me. My family's Catholic, but for like many years, I was just atheist. Like I didn't really have any beliefs. And then I started to say like, maybe I'm spiritual, you know, stuff like that, you know, and then it just like was like a seed that was planted and just like sprout immediately. And after that, I was so curious about anything Buddhist.
Yeah.
And I was just consuming like all these videos and like all these books and stuff like that. I didn't go to any temples yet. I didn't go to, I didn't have any like specific teachers or anything like that. But I think a part of it now, looking back, was also like this drive to reconnect to my heritage and my culture too. Not that like, you know, Catholicism isn't also Vietnamese or, you know, like Vietnamese Catholics are like less Vietnamese because they're Catholic, like nothing like that, you know, because obviously Buddhism is also from India. A different place. It's not from Vietnam either. But, you know, I just felt like Buddhism was kind of like foreign. You know, like Catholicism, if you're a Vietnamese Catholic and you come to the States, I'm just going to straight up say like, it's easier for you to assimilate.
Right.
You know, because
a lot of Christian churches sponsored a lot of refugees to come over. So it helps that you, even if you don't do the same prayers, and because I know Catholics have a lot more ritual, right? Kind of like Mass has a lot of specific things versus maybe Lutheran or other ways that you preach and like what is a father versus a pastor, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So, but overall, the idea of like believing in God, blessing, following
Jesus.
Jesus, that's
Yeah.
a little bit more easily translatable.
Absolutely.
It offers a common ground
Yeah.
with like mainstream America. Even if mainstream America, you know, if it's not like every single human is Christian, it's like our country does have a lot of Puritan Christian like values
Yeah.
at the foundation of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that, you know, even with a lot of kind of weird, like, oh, Catholics aren't Christian and like Christians aren't Catholic, like, you know, like when you really understand it from like almost like an academic perspective, I'm like, yo, you all are Christians. Like Catholics are the biggest group of Christians. They have the Bible and they have, you know, God, they have Jesus. You know, it's way more translatable and understandable than Buddhism. For sure, you know, and like when I was exploring Buddhism, it felt more like I was exploring this side to my Vietnamese heritage, although that isn't the religion of my family, but like just the Eastern thought and Eastern philosophy and Eastern ways of looking at the world. I realized that a lot of Buddhism is embedded in Vietnamese culture. Whether you're Catholic or not, like it's been there for so long that it's in the language even. So one example is Có Duyên.
Có Duyên, yeah.
Right? So Có Duyên is this idea of like fate, right? And a lot of people treat it as like almost like owing somebody something. Like I heard people explain it to me where like if I'm showing up in your life and for some reason like we have crossed paths and we are either working together or we're colleagues or like even if it's something small, you know,
asking for a tour,
like why out of like millions of people that we end up meeting, why us, you know? So then Vietnamese people automatically go to Có Duyên, which is like it's fated, and there must have been some kind of debt that was owed to each other in a previous life.
Right.
You know, like we have already crossed paths. It was meant to connect. And I'm like, that's very Buddhist, you know, it's so, honestly, it's so beautiful.
It is.
I love when Vietnamese people go there.
Yeah.
You know, like talking about Ying, you know, like even though I feel, you know, we do have a lot of control over our lives, you know, we shouldn't like just passively rely on fate, you know, but like just that idea of like, oh yeah, it must have been fated that we were going to meet. And like they talk about that so casually.
Right.
You know, and it's like that's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Because, and this is like genuinely such a joke, but also not a joke. My friends and I always talk about how Vietnamese-Americans, especially in California, are like maybe 4 degrees apart, but I didn't think that I had an actual connection with you.
Yeah.
Because I was introduced to you as like an Instagram like content creator, and then I learned from my good friend Julie, who happens to be your good friend for much longer than she's been my good friend.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, wait a minute. So that means if he's your friend and I'm your friend, like we're just 2 degrees apart.
Yeah.
The billions of people in California with like how we've grown up far apart from each other, the age gap between us, it's like it shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
And yet it is.
Yeah. And even if we did kind of like sort of have 2 degrees of separation, just the fact that like everything kind of aligns and like happens.
Timing.
It's still special, you know?
And then to have like a term for it, because it's always beautiful to have like a word or a vocabulary term for a phenomenon, a sensation that can be reflected in a deep belief in karma, merit, fate.
Yeah.
It's kind of amazing.
Yeah. And that speaks to like just like these belief systems and these like cultural streams that have been happening in Vietnamese culture. Once you have like that vocabulary, you are able to express things that like you don't express in English. You know, you have like this whole different toolkit to help you see the world in a different kind of way. Yeah. But I'm really curious about like your experience with Buddhism too. I don't know. Were you always a devout Buddhist?
Yeah, I would say for a very long time, up until I entered college essentially, I just like went through the motions. It's like, okay, it's a new year. I have to drive my mom to the temple because my dad's not going to do it because he has to go to sleep and work the next day. Sure. So for me, it was just like a chore. It was an errand I'd have to do with my mom. And I guess it's like a good way to like appease her, so she doesn't nag me. But then when I moved away, I was so far away from a Vietnamese community. I didn't have a car. I was in central Pennsylvania in what felt like in the middle of nowhere. And the only thing that made me feel truly connected to home, because I couldn't call home all the time. I had homework and classes and, like silly parties with my schoolmates. The only thing that kept me truly grounded in my identity, surrounded by people who are mostly white, because I was at a white predominant institution, was Buddhism. Similar to you, it's kind of like it was my way of like being more connected and having my Vietnamese identity reinforced, because that's when I actually practice Oposota, which is like the holy day observance, including all the 5 precepts, like don't speak ill, do not harm, have no ill thoughts, blah, 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 no alcohol, no cosmetics, no jewelry.
Yeah, no intoxicants.
No intoxicants, no entertainment, sleeping on the floor.
Oh, that's beyond 5 precepts.
That's the 7,
that's like...
7 precepts in. So it's like for me, that practice of discipline, that lasted through college really helped me kind of like pare back all of the noise that you can get swept up with in university when you're in a high stress situation with a lot of different people. It's just like when I needed to like be at like find peace with myself in such a situation, I turned to Buddhism.
Yeah, which is what it's really meant to do.
Yeah, and then I came back from college and I'm like more spiritual. I'm just kind of like, let's go to temple, let's do this, let's bữa nay ăn chay. So like me and you, Mom, we gotta make sure that we're not having meat for the next 2 days. And then she was so happy. She was so happy that like she felt like you listened to me. And me being like, my mom and I now have so much more common ground. So like even when there are moments where we have frustrations with each other, where I don't feel like she's hearing me out, or like she's imposing her like thoughts on like what would make a successful life, my marriage and my lack of relationships, like why don't you have a husband, why do you have this job, you can do better. Like when I feel like she is being really mean to me, I still have Buddhism to like come back to her, to like seek forgiveness, to have a common ground, to understand that like it doesn't matter because we pray with each other every day.
And then when you look at what Buddhism prioritizes, it is way beyond these things, these material things, and like having a husband or like whatever like the day-to-day concerns are. It's just like, but we have like this living a good life and taking care of people and like this like cosmic goodness to also do, and like I'm observing that, and then parents are kind of like, okay, that's actually probably more important,
So like she's really happy that after college I was so gung-ho about like joining her at temple or doing things and like making sure like I know the proper procedures of covering myself, asking for incense and oil, candles, all that stuff. So whatever argument we have for whatever thing that comes in our life, it ultimately is overshadowed by the fact that we share a deep connection and a deep understanding of each other. Because we are co-practitioners. Like in the house, it's both of us. And I mean, my dad also is along for the ride, but like, it's just different with my mom. I think a mother-daughter relationship is very hard to like describe
and find common ground on.
I mean, I hear this quote more often than not, but like womanhood is like a journey to understand your mom. That's what I've been thinking about for a long time now.
You feel like that's true?
Yeah, that's true, because it's like now that I'm like at the age where, she would always talk about like, oh, when I was your age, I had been already doing these. Like I have memorized the step A through Z correctly, the order with which you're supposed to pray, like which side you go on, how do you like put up a bang the, and then like for chung the, it's just like it's a very specific way of doing things. And she had memorized everything by the age of 14. And I'm like barely learning it at an age like 10 years older than where she already was.
Yeah.
So it was like, oh, I'm technically behind on her timeline, but the fact that like, you know, I can have this conversation, I can ask her questions.
Yeah.
She's so happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm just kind of like, wow, you had to learn so much at such a young age. Like,
yeah.
I'm overwhelmed now and I have a fully formed frontal cortex.
Uh-huh.
Like, you must have been, like, the conditions of the households and the society that you were under, where you were, like, taking charge of your household by age 14, and, like, you were leading a lot of, like, the traditions. Like, you're the ones, like, we have to do this, we have to do timely schedules, this is the time that we go to the market.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of, like, responsibility. So, like, learning about that and learning about the process, and I'm hearing a lot more about my mom.
Yeah.
Like, really understanding the stressors that she's been through.
That's such a big thing that I've been seeing happen with a lot of people our generation, including myself, is finally having that compassion and understanding for our parents. You know, I have the same thing with my mom too, where I don't know, like growing up, maybe I just wasn't listening to her, or like as a young person in the States, like I was just so stressed out and overwhelmed by whatever was going on during that time. And that could have been like even like identity issues, or just like figuring myself out. And like that was stuff my mom was looking at me go through, and she's just like, what the hell is that, dude? Like, that's not a big deal. Like, come on, suck it up, man. You know, and I think that reaction gets me to feel like, Mom, you don't understand me. And then like it like blocks me off from like trying to understand her. But I think finally getting to this age where I really appreciate where I come from, my heritage and my parents' stories. And now it's just like, oh my God, I see you.
Yeah.
And I see you, and I deeply respect what you went through. And, you know, those things that she says, you know, where it's just like, I don't get what you guys are going through. First of all, it doesn't bother me so much anymore. And number two, I can talk to her about it, you know, and kind of have like conversations about it, because I'm coming at it now from a place of respect, as opposed to like, you know, like, you don't get me, Mom, you know, like that kind of thing, right? And then also, she has come around as well. And it might have been like my change in how I approached her kind of had her kind of like lower her guard down more. And then she's finally like, oh, it's pretty hard for you too. You know, like, it's like, now we get each other. We can like meet in the middle, you know? She's like, it's just different for you guys. I remember the phone conversation where that happened, and it was like profound. You know, things have never been the same since then. Like, we really see eye to eye on a lot of things now. And not just that, when we don't see eye to eye, my mom is really just saying like, look, I have my concerns about what's going on with you, and you might not agree with them, and you might not follow suggestions that I have for you, but I want to say it because that's just where I'm coming from. Like, just for her to say that, it's just like, just listen to me. And I'm like, cool, Mom, I'm gonna listen to you. Yeah. You know, and like that's been so healing for us. And I feel like that's happening across the board for our generation. Yeah. Like, for you and your mom, was other than like her kind of like, I don't know, maybe nitpicking your Buddhist practices, like, was it also like kind of a gap in understanding of like, you know, what you go through growing up in the States and what she went through growing up in Vietnam?
Yeah, it was definitely that. And then also like kind of like career choices, because essentially she's just kind of like, you've studied so hard, you've gotten such good grades, but you work in an industry that is like, the ROI is not there. Like, why aren't you in a Fortune 500 big company with like maximum benefits and like just making six figures? And I'm just kind of like, yeah, it's a little my fault, I guess, for like choosing my realms of study, which is political science and English literature. People are like, you're gonna be a lawyer, right? I was like, I don't know about that. And yeah, so for her, it's just like, oh, it's such a waste. Like, we've put so much into your education investment. Like, we don't feel like the income that you're making is like enough to live. And enough to live a full life, not just like get by day to day and pay your bills, but like enjoy things. These are conversations I have with my mom all the time. Yeah.
Have you guys found understanding now in terms of that, or?
We're working on it. Okay. We're working on it. But like, it's a constant working on it. But like, the thing is that like, at the end of the day, when we talk about ultimately why do I want and she want me to make money,
Yeah.
it's because she wants me to have a house, have a place to live, where, oh gosh, sorry, I'm gonna like cry because I like really love talking about my mom because I love her so much. When I cannot call her one day, she wants me to make sure I'm gonna be okay.
Yeah, that's all it comes down to. Yeah, just
And
through
then,
all of that, it's just her wanting to take care of you.
yeah, and then it's like, for me, when I think about praying, I think about her.
Yeah, yeah. It's not just like listening to her now, but it's like having this bond with her, wanting her to be at peace, and like kind of acknowledging her love for you is like where this comes from.
Yeah, and then, I mean, I also lean more Theravada. Like, I am mostly Mahayana, but none of the meditation. I mostly just pray. The idea of like, yes, nibbana, you want to eventually have non-existence. You can't crave non-existence because that's tanha, that's not good.
Right.
But
Yeah.
ultimately, nibbana is the idea of like, thinking about it as like a candle lineup. If each candle is each lifetime that you want, the ultimate goal is to blow everything out.
Yes.
And that's beautiful and that's fine. But, knowing that I'm probably going to have another lifetime, another life cycle, I do want to carry my mom with me into that.
Yeah. Yeah. And like people have told me, including monks, are like, "Oh, you found Buddhism in this life.
Yeah.
That means you're in the right direction already."
Yeah.
But then it's probably going to keep going, And then I was like, I'm so into it now. I'm so about Buddhism. Like, I kind of want to be a monk. And they're like, you don't have to be a monk.
You don't have to.
Not now, maybe in the future you'll be a monk. But if you're not ready for it now, then you're just not ready. Like, it doesn't mean you just go from 0 to like 1,000 and just become a monk. Like, that's not it. It's just like, take the steps. And that's in the suttas. The Buddha has suttas where he says, hey, lay people, we need you. We don't want all of you to just become monks. You
don't have to renounce. Actually, don't renounce.
Yeah. Otherwise, like, everyone would have just become monks. Like, the lay people are important, and he lays out ways for lay people to live in a way that's honorable and things like that. But there's also like this other, how do I explain this? Like, this other almost like acceptance of ways of life that are not in line with Dhamma. Yeah. And it's like, for example, you're not really supposed to be like killing animals and like, having like looked down upon professions, because part of the Eightfold Path is to have, good livelihood, right? But there are people who don't have good livelihood. And in Buddhism, they're not automatically seen as the most disgusting, terrible people.
Right.
It's just like kind of unfortunate that their karma has led them to the situation where they cannot break free of that yet.
Yeah.
So like, they're still good people, and we still have them in our community and things like that. They don't become like untouchables or anything like that. And we don't treat them as like horrible sinners or anything like that. Everyone's just kind of on a different path, and like the temple is there for you. So like, when you come and you're ready, you practice. And it's like, I think that shows up in Vietnamese culture and Asian cultures where you have very strong Buddhist belief systems, is like, we're not trying to fix everybody and fix everything. Like, there are things that are not going right, and that's okay. When things are ready to find their way, they'll find their way. We're not trying to like say you're wrong and it's time to go to temple and then like shave your head, and like go full on now. That's what I think.
Yeah.
I feel that in Vietnamese culture. I feel that in a lot of other Southeast Asian cultures that have really strong Buddhist beliefs, is like, hey, things aren't perfect, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, chill. Like.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of want to touch on a couple of points, because I basically think that it's really beautiful how you've come to faith. Because like, faith is like such an umbrella thing. Like you can have faith as a Muslim, as a Catholic, Lutheran, Christian, whatever. But to have developed faith is something that, I mean, I would like most people to do, but I understand if some people like want to have more of a rational explanation for things. And that's really important because some of like the most brilliant thinkers have been people who have like maybe have not necessarily had faith in like in a religion or a spiritual like teaching, but had faith in the way that like human creativity can push people forward and connect people. So that's where like science is. Like science may not be like a faith in the traditional sense of like that, but like there's a faith in science.
There's a little bit of faith in science. Yeah,
you have to be like, it has to work out.
Yeah,
something
because
has got to give.
The regular everyday person isn't a scientist, you know, like a scientist will actually know like, okay, this is why it works, you know, but like a layperson is going to be like, I'm just going to trust the scientists. Right. I don't know how it works, you know, but I trust their system, and that's faith.
Yeah.
You know, although, you know, anyone can step in and argue that like, hey, you know, like they can explain everything and replicate the experiment and all that kind of stuff. But I think the average person who doesn't know is still putting faith into the science. And I feel pretty strongly that there are also scientists out there who could say like, hey, you know, we have a study for this, but actually there's things that we aren't able to explain in this study, and that's there. You know, like even though it's replicable, you know, there's still a whole bunch of things we don't understand yet. And there's room for whatever interpretation is out there. There are scientists who have faith, who are religious as well. You know, there's just all of that. So
like developing faith, I think that also helped like you understand your mom, because 100%. It sounds like she has so much faith. In Jesus, in God, in the Holy Trinity. And then for you to at least develop that capacity to have faith allows you to understand your mom and her capacity to have faith and have love and 100%. Care. And that's kind of beautiful. And then to the other point of like taking refuge in the Dhamma, of just kind of like being like, if no one else got me, the Dhamma's got me.
And that's so similar to Christian faith.
All Abrahamic religions. And like, I mean, I love a pirate movie, like Pirates of the Caribbean pops off, but like Sinbad, like the story of Sinbad, the quote unquote pirate, in the Arabian Nights, like that entire thing is just kind of like, if no one's got me, I know Allah's got me. And so it's like that type of sentiment has been reiterated through so many different civilizations. So many people have come to this decision. And I think it's because ultimately people just want to feel cared for by any means. And so, you know, as you grow older, your community might shrink, might grow, might shrink again. And then it's just you. And so for you to retain that feeling of community and comfort, why not have a faith?
I'm so glad you brought that up. It's been surprising the amount of connection that I have with my mom now because of that. And in the beginning thinking like, there's no way, you know, she's Catholic. This is Buddhism. They're like conflicting. But no, just like you beautifully put how just the idea, the concept of having some kind of something to stand on, something that could take care of you. Although with Buddhism, it's like you're kind of trained to know there's nothing to stand on, you know, and like that's how you take care of yourself. But even in that sense, having a system of belief, but also a community that supports you, that, you know, ultimately you're going to be okay. People want to be told you're going to be okay, you know, and that's really what the faith does. And what you said about how now I understand my mom's faith, why she has faith and why faith is so central to her. Because now I have faith. And like, whereas before it was bizarre to me and I would just be so abrasive and so like scientific and just kind of like feel almost like superior to my mom, that I'm like, no, I can't talk about these things, science or rationality with my mom because she's a person of faith. And now it's like, oh my God, I get it. You know, and then we talked about this recently too, like how, you know, me being like a closet Buddhist, or I had to be a closet Buddhist, you know, and like at first, which was true. I was just meditating,
Yeah,
you know,
you're just
but like I got so into it, and like my mom's like, "What are you doing?" You know, like I'm just meditating, just sitting and breathing, you know, and then like Buddha started showing up, you know, and my mom's like, "What is this Buddha statue?" And I'm like, "He's just a teacher, mom. He's just a dude, you know.
He's just some guy.
He's just
Don't
some
worry.
guy. I just like him. He looks cool. Everybody has him in their garden, you know." And finally being like, "I'm actually full on Buddhist, mom." And like at first that was such a shocker to her. And then it didn't take long before like we connected more than ever before, because now we have this common ground. I understand her faith because I have faith now. We have so many overlapping core values now because of our faith, of our religion. She cares so much about people. She's so generous. She's always trying to take care of people.
Yeah.
And those are like the key things that are like it's the essence
Yeah.
of those two religions and all the major religions.
Yeah.
And now we talk about those things, like we can talk about those things like all night. You know, it's like that bond is so real now. And it's so similar to what you experienced with your mom.
Yeah.
Where like my mom is so concerned about the
life choices
I've made, you know, but at the end of the day, she knows I'm a good person. You know, she knows I'm like headed in the right direction in terms of like virtue, my values, my love of people, and just what I want to really do in the world and with my life is very good.
Yeah.
You know, even if I'm poor, you know, even if like I don't have any money, you know, she knows like my son is a good person, you know, and we have that in common, you know. So like, oh my God, like I totally resonate with your relationship and your experience with your mom.
Yeah.
In terms of that. Yeah.
And it's just one of those things that it's just like it's a feeling that you don't know when you're gonna come to it until it comes to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, I just kind of wanted to go back to this note that you had about like how Buddhism's like you're taught to have like no real foundation.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm just like, yes and no.
Yes and no. Yeah.
It's always a yes
Buddhism
and.
is always yes and no.
It's always yes and no.
Yeah.
But and then that's where I think my Mahayanaism really comes
yeah, Mahayana, yeah.
because like I'm like on that edge between Mahayana and Theravada just because of like my mom's practice.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So my mom is like, she can be real old school. She can be real Theravada. But then growing up in like Saigon City, she's just kind of like, you know, Mahayana stuff. This is fun. This ritual it's very pretty. So there was this thing called the allegory of the raft.
Oh yeah.
Chinese Mahayana, and I just think that yes, even though it's coming from a different vehicle, it's really a good way to like describe to people why the Dhamma exists. It is the allegory of the raft is an allegory in which there's this person who needs to cross the river, and so there's this. Fortunately, they have a raft right in front of them to help them cross the river. So they take the raft and they paddle it, and they get onto the other side. And then there's like, wait a minute. Okay, so do I leave the raft here? Just like leave it here? Because it was so useful. Like, and I have to go there, but do I need another raft?
Yeah.
So it's a question of, do you take the raft with you? Like, do you carry the thing from the river to take it with you to the other side? Because you don't know how far the river goes, or so you need another one on the other side. Or do you just like leave it there? And that's supposed to be a symbol for the Dhamma. Like, do you use these teachings? Do you hold onto these teachings because you don't know what's on the other side?
Yeah.
Or do you leave it because you've accomplished what you need to accomplish?
Yeah. You don't bring it.
Yeah. And then you leave it there because the idea is it serves you to achieve this sense of enlightenment, literal awareness of like yourself, your surroundings, and you have to let it go.
Yeah, you don't cling to it. Yeah.
You walk on.
Clinging is very much what...
The core of suffering.
Yeah, absolutely. Tanha.
Yeah.
I love the allegory of the raft. Yeah,
it's one of my favorite things. And, you know, it's like one of those things where it's just like, oh, that's so Chinese, or like that's only available in this scripture. And it's like, but like we all share these kinds of like teaching tools. It's a teaching tool.
Yeah.
It is a one method to inform somebody who might not totally understand what it means to be like, like impermanence. What?
Yeah.
You have to be like selfless, like there's no sense of self what? And there's like, okay, you're not getting this. Let me see if I can explain it this way.
It's not easy, I think, being an Asian Buddhist.
Yeah.
Because Asian Buddhism, and I'm going to say Asian Buddhism to separate it from something else that's going on, which is called secular Buddhism, which is happening because of mostly, you know, Western people adopting Buddhism, and then
treating
now
it as a philosophy rather than a religion.
Yeah, Buddhism is not a religion; it's a philosophy. You know, whatever's been happening with Buddhism has been just a bunch of superstition and like a bunch of rituals, and like there's all these problems with it, and we are like purifying Buddhism,
filtering
and just like keeping the essentials, and then tying it back to the time of the Buddha, and be like, this is what Buddha really taught, and this is what Buddhism should be, like this whole narrative. And then Asian Buddhism being treated as kind of like really alien and like, you know, really kind of distant and like from the old world. And that's really affecting, I think, Asian Americans, from what I'm understanding, is 1.5 or second gen Asian Americans who come from Buddhist families are like, yo, this is what my parents practice. It's like, I don't connect to this. And when I go to temple, it's like, I don't understand what they're saying. Like, I don't understand these rituals.
Like, why is there a candle? And why are you giving me a bottle of oil? Like, what's going on?
Yeah. And then that might have to do with like language gap too. Like, you know, I don't speak the language here, but like, it feels like hard for them to connect to the religion.
Yeah, continue going to temple, like as their parents go older. Like, how do they join the temple?
Exactly. And I could be wrong, but I think there are like more and more people who come from Buddhist families who are like, oh, I'm not religious, or become Christian, or like, you know, find other religions that are more in line with like, you know, their experience in America, for example, right? Because, or they follow a more secular form of Buddhism. But from what I'm understanding too, like those secular Buddhist spaces, or even not even secular, but Western Buddhist spaces, they show up as an Asian American, and it's like all white people. You know, and they're like, wait, what is this? You know, like, I don't really feel like I belong here either, you know? So like, do you sense any of that happening? And do you feel like you're kind of a minority as an Asian American Buddhist practicing Asian Buddhism that's like pretty aligned with what your mom practices?
Yeah, I definitely feel that. And unfortunately, this person passed away from cancer. There was this amazing blog that I followed. I think it's like Angry Asian
Buddhist, yeah.
And his documentation of his journey to like basically take all of the things that his parents taught him and try to find other people online to like kind of like be like, am I the only one who feels weird about going to like these Western spaces, even the spaces held by really radical, really caring, welcoming folks of color, like non-white folks. Like there's a lot of really great Black practitioners and Latinx practitioners. There's so many great folks that in the West have adopted Buddhism and have a really beautiful practice and have a really like in-depth, thoroughly researched, really considerate explanation of Buddhism that as an Asian American who truly, genuinely feels connected to your heritage and roots cannot always be like, yeah, sure, because it's also about missing your family. Because a lot of these temples like hold the memories of like this is literally the picture of your like grandparent or something. I think there's like a huge want to understand, and I think there should be a bigger effort maybe on the temple's part, because I know some temples do youth group and youth programming, but like a bigger effort from some organizer who can bridge that language gap, or like open up a conversation and open up an opportunity for folks who are second gen or my age to really engage with that and not feel shame. Like, oh, you should have known this. Like, did your parents teach you right? Because you should have already had this.
Yeah, like, what do I know this, but you don't? You're Asian.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So there's like a lot of work that needs to be done to probably just build out a program to help people like find their way without feeling of like, oh, I should have, maybe I should have done this more. Maybe I should have taken a course. Maybe I should have listened to my parents like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's like this huge tension about it. And I know that there's a want. It's just a matter of, I unfortunately do not have a lot of connections with my local temple. It's a language barrier for me. I think I overcompensate. My shame over the fact that I don't have great Vietnamese by like reading so much. Something's got to give, and apparently it was my language skills. But I have an interest in if there's like any particular way that I can like come together and like do something with some folks so we can kind of have these deeper conversations.
Yeah, and create these spaces.
Spaces where it's like, we don't want to like be exclusionary, and we also want to understand that like when we say Asian in USA and in like California, a lot of people think like fair skin or like East Asian, Japan, Korean, Chinese, and then Vietnamese, I guess. But like, they're Buddhist people who are Thai and Laos, and they have their own pocket community, and then Cambodian community and like Long Beach have a Buddhist practice, and like they have youth engagement in a different way. But if we want to like have more people understand their Asian American identity and what it means to be an Asian American with faith, I think there's got to be something where people who are willing to put themselves out there to like fumble, connect, and talk about it more openly. Because it just seems so personal. It's just like, oh, it's just something my family does. Like, I don't know if I want to talk to this like stranger I meet at like a networking event or like a night out. We'll just like sit down and chat about.
Even though like it might be something that they actually do need or actually are seeking.
And it's like a strong craving, because I know it's not just me. I've had this conversation with a lot of other like Asian American, second gen, third gen Buddhists, or like even like people who are like, I kind of want to have a kid and I'm not going to leave America, but I want them to know. Like who, like if we have like a dead relative on the wall of this temple, I want them to know what to do and how to pray. And I was like, like we really need to like have something like a program, a workshop, something where people can come together and share knowledge and share gaps in knowledge and share things about how they can continue the hard work of a lot of our elders.
A very long lineage. Do you feel like something has happened recently with our generation where there's a greater interest in finding our roots and our heritage? Being Vietnamese-American, right? Where do you feel we are at right now in terms of like folks who are, in their late 20s or 30s or maybe even early 40s, like this generation of like second to third gen, like where are we at in terms of like heritage and, seeking that understanding of our roots?
So this is going back to Julie because I love her. But we connected through this organization called Vietnamese-American Arts and Letters Association. And they, for the last 30 years, they have been trying to put into like in front of people, Vietnamese Americans in Orange County, mostly films made by Vietnamese people from Vietnam, from like VicU, like from Germany, from all over parts of US, all over the world. And I mean, now it's gotten really like critical attention with like mass media. Like, even though people have been working for decades to like have their own film representation, even if it's like very underground, very DIY, like now all of a sudden there have been a really big investment into getting Vietnamese voices out there. I mean, The Sympathizer is very popular. I have, nuanced opinions.
Me too. We won't get into it here.
I think it's really valuable. I think it's a really valuable cultural production.
Big time.
But it's like
we have more to talk about.
Oh my gosh.
More to say.
That's another time. Chris.
Or just in terms of like the Vietnamese-American or Vietnamese overseas or just Vietnamese experience. There's a lot of things that, even after The Sympathizer, we still need to go back and touch on. And The Sympathizer kind of like, in a way paved the way and like open another door for us, even though like maybe all of that hasn't been said yet. Like now we can kind of move forward and talk about it.
That was my entire English senior thesis.
Here
we go.
But
I would say like now that there is a very mass media critical like interest in these stories, and a lot of people our age are at this point in life where they have resources, where they have an income and time to like invest in actual creators, or they become the creators themselves. It's really fun to like see how, I guess, people are adding their own voices to really put together the mosaic that is the Vietnamese identity.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
what a thing to discuss and talk about, because it is like very big and abstract and always morphing, and everyone, whether they have an opinion or not, is part of it. And it's like, it's beautiful to see, and like kind of clumsy and scary at the same time. Is it like something that will look the same in 10 years or 20 years, and like time will tell?
Yeah, but we've been doing this for over a millennia. Like we've also discussed about this, where I think the true Vietnamese spirit and identity comes from our ability to like build something with all these different crossroads and all this like different influence.
Absolutely.
Thinking about the former name of Indochina, like yes, it's a regional name for Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam, but like I feel like Indochina, in terms of how it's referred to within the Vietnamese context, is accurate, because it's like we are at the fulcrum, we are at the crossroads of like Indian influence and Chinese influence, and within that intersection, we built and created beautiful things. Same thing with French influences. Like we took a baguette and we made it better. Like, you know, like I think the Vietnamese spirit and the Vietnamese identity is one that is based on cultivating something unique out of bits and pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, looking at the whole wide spectrum of our history and our culture, like on the surface, it looks like a copycat of something, but it's just like, just dig a little deeper and you'll see like we just took elements from things and like really just kind of, you know, made it our thing. And Vietnamese innovation, ingenuity, Vietnamese perseverance, you know, survival instinct. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. That's really the core of Vietnamese culture. And the fact that it is probably going to be different in the future is, definitely exciting. Yeah, we're doing like right now in Vietnam, that's happening with like hip hop, fashion, you know, like even culinary things, you know, like, you know, Vietnamese cuisine is like something that you might not want to touch and tweak, you know, like you can like trigger a lot of people, but like on that front, like a lot of cool stuff's happening, you know, whether it's bizarre or it's just for the gram, whatever, but you know, like pho cocktails are happening, and like, you know,
pho perfume,
pho burgers, like, you know, whatever. I have a lot of things to say about that, but just what people are able to do with, you know, this whatever, like tradition, custom, like these strict standards for what is Vietnamese, and like, you know, break into something completely new, is still a Vietnamese thing to do.
It is. It is. It's the Vietnamese spirit that like peeks through most things, I think. And again, we've been around for like over a millennia. Like there's a lot of culture to be to look back upon, and a lot of culture to look forward to.
Exciting things to come. All right, so we'll wrap up here. All right. Thanks, Elaine.